So in this video, we'll understand Entra ID, user account. In another terminology, we call it as an identities. So we have an Entra ID tenant, which is across the Azure and M365. So when we set up an account in Azure, so by default, Azure is going to create an Entra ID tenant, which is like an at the rate your name dot on Microsoft.com. So which is going to be identification for your Entra ID. So on this single tenant, we can create multiple user accounts and groups and many things. And these user accounts can access the Azure cloud as well as the 365 services. So we see called as in here, called as in a cloud users. So cloud users, we call them as a cloud users. So user accounts exists in Entra ID. Like all the user accounts information like password and everything will exist in the Entra ID. And we can specify the username, I would say the password is stored in Entra ID. And all the password policies are applicable as per Entra ID. So it's going to create a user account and Entra ID with all the attributes like the first name, last name, display name, department, whatever information we want to maintain about a user account, we can maintain. Along with that, the password will be stored in the Entra ID, and also the password policies can be applied, and which is as per the Entra ID. So we call this as a cloud users or cloud identities. And one more, we call it as an external users, or we call them as a guest. We call them as a guest. The external users are the guests. So we would call them as an. So it is not a reference, an user account referenced, I would say called as an referred user account created. So what does that mean by it? So a user who is outside of the organization, we want to provide them access to our Azure or 365 services. So, but is not part of our organization, maybe a consultant or a partner or a vendor who has his own email ID or a password, or who has his own user account and password in some other directory services. But still, we want to provide him access to the 365 or cloud. Then we create called as an external users or a guest. So it is basically referred user account. We use only email ID to create the user. So it doesn't store any password, or password policies will not be applicable. Not applicable. Because as the username is not being stored in this one, so there will not be any kind of a password will be stored and there is no password policies are applied or applicable. So what happens now? The user will authenticate to the Entra ID with his own credentials, then access the Azure Cloud or 365 services. The third kind of an identities, we call them as an federated identities. Federated identities, or we call them as an on-prem identities. So we can sync the users from the on-prem Active Directory. If you already have the user accounts existing in your on-prem AD server, then we can synchronize them to the Azure AD so that the user management can happen at on-prem AD. We'll discuss this later in a dedicated session where I talk about Azure AD Connect, or I would say called it an Entra Connect, but just for the sake of here. So we call them as an federated or on-prem identities, or we can call it as the on-prem user accounts. So when we create a user account, so there are two ways which we can, I would say, a creation of a user account. We can create an individual account one by one, or we can create a bulk. So let's log into the Azure portal. So I'm going to the Entra. You can also go to an Entra admin using entra.microsoft.com. So it is always better we go to the Entra dedicated admin portal. We call it as an entra.microsoft.com. So as this is a common for both 365 and Azure, so we can use it called as entra.microsoft.com. Now, so under this one, we can see called as in users. So it takes you to the users page. And here we can see new users, create a new user. So you can see the identity here, user principal name, and I see the ones which have been available here, which has been created. Now I want to have my own identity over here. I don't want to have this one, but I want to have my own identity like an @acutelearn.com. So that is where we call it as a custom domain. A custom or domain. So it's nothing but you can have your own, having our own user principal name, what we call it as a principal name for the Azure Entra tenant. Entra tenant. So instead of having like an @acutelearn.onmicrosoft.com, so we can have it like an @acutelearn.com. So for this particular one, so in order to achieve like this, so we should be the owners of this particular domain. So we cannot provide whatever the name which we want it. Let's say I cannot give it like an @microsoft.com. Microsoft will not accept. So Microsoft is going to verify the ownership of the domain. So Microsoft is going to verify the ownership of the domain using the DNS method. Because see, I cannot have like an @oracle.com because I don't own the oracle.com. I don't own the Microsoft.com. I don't own the google.com. So I should be the owner of that. How Microsoft is going to verify that I'm the real owner of this particular domain called as an acutelearn.com? It is going to allow us to create some kind of a DNS record. So if you are able to create the DNS record, okay, in the domain acutelearn.com, then the Microsoft feels that I'm the owner of that, then it enables that. so that we can create user accounts under that particular domain. So for that one, let's go to the Entra. So the left side we can see called as an domain names. Go to the domain name and click on add a custom domain. Provide the domain name. So I'm providing a domain name called as an acutelearn.com. If this domain is already been added into some other tenant, it will not allow you to add here. So only one Entra ID tenant can own this domain. Okay. So now it is asking me to create a DNS record in my public DNS server for this particular domain. So I'm going to the my GoDaddy. I'm creating and a DNS record. So what is it saying? It's saying that create a text record with this particular value. So I'm selecting a text record and at the red symbol, your value in 30 minutes. Click on save. So now the Microsoft is going to verify that whether we created this DNS record in our DNS entry. Maybe just let's wait for a minute. So sometimes it may the DNS to populate across the DNS servers, it may take some 5 to 10 minutes of time. But better always is a try after 5 minutes to verify it. If you don't have access to the DNS, maybe if some other colleague or someone has an access to this DNS, then you can share these details and ask him to create a DNS record. Then you can come back and click on verify and you should be able to do it. So I'm just clicking on a verify. Now the Microsoft will go and verify my DNS server, whether that I'm now it's saying verify domain name, successfully verified domain name, acutelearn.com for use with your default directory. Now I'm just closing this. Click on refresh. Now I see called as an acutelearn.com. So first and foremost thing we need to identify, okay, what is your custom domain for your Microsoft Entra ID before creating users. Later also we can add it and we can modify the user principal name, but before that, the good thing is in identify this one. So now let's I'm going to the new user, create a new user. So when I'm selecting the create user, still it is not reflecting it. So maybe I just have to wait for some time. Let me reload this page. Yeah. Now I can see acutelearn.com. So I'm selecting acutelearn.com. Username, I'm giving it acute. I'm saying Azure user1 or something, whatever the name. So now the username will be Azure user1 at acutelearn.com instead of the Bullam V Ramana one. So I'm giving it whatever the nickname. If you want to change this one, the display name. The display name, you can give it anything in the password. So it is going to generate the password auto generate. If you want to give your own password, you can give it. If not, you can use it auto generate. I'm just saying auto generate. So account enabled. If we enable the account, then only the user can log in. But if the account is disabled, the user cannot log in. So just go to the properties. So we can see first name, last name, user type, job title, company. Okay. If as part of the organization, if we have to fill this information like the employee ID, company name, job title, and because many companies, we maintain all this information on the user account so that it becomes easy to identify and also the hierarchy. So if the HR team is providing you all the details, then you can fill it, or later point of time we can come and update these particular details. So during the creation of the user account, it is going to ask you some kind of roles and groups. If you want to add this user into a group, then you can add him. But if you want to provide certain roles, permissions to this user, you can add it. But later we will see when we talk about role-based access control module that what is the importance of these things. I'm just creating, review, and create. So when we create a user account by default, the user does not have any permissions on anything. So we just created a user account in Entra ID. And nor we have not assigned any kind of a license like an M365 licenses or applications to this user. We only simply created a user account. Then let me store the password. Okay. No, I didn't copy the password of this user. Let me select, reset the password because I forgot to copy the password. It is going to generate the new password. Let me save this. So let me copy the user account. Now let's see what this user can do. Now I'm going to the another browser. I'm trying to access the portal.office.com, the MS365 portal. But the first time when the user is trying to log in, it prompts to change the password. So it's giving you a warning message. Let's keep your account secure. So do you want to set up a multi-factor authentication? For now, I'm clicking on skip for now, 14 days. Now I'm able to log into the MS365 portal. We can see Microsoft 365 portal. And as of now, as there are no licenses assigned to that user, he is not able to see it. Similarly, he can also go to the portal.azure.com, but Microsoft will force to configure the MFA for the Azure portal. Yeah, I'm doing skip. They're saying it is basically for Azure portal. In order to access the Azure portal, MFA is a mandatory. But I just don't want. So this way, what happens whenever we create a new user account, the new user account by default get and default limited access to the Azure and as well as 365. So for further requirements, like if the user want to use an MS Office application or email, then we need to assign the license to the user. If the user want to access the computer storage, some kind of then he should be provided with necessary permissions. Now I'm going to the users. Now here we can see bulk operations. So I want to create a bulk users. So let's say you have 300 user accounts which you want to create Going one by one may take a longer time. So Microsoft provides called as a bulk create. So you can create a sample file that how the users, you have to fill the data and click on bulk create. So let me go to the a file which I downloaded already. And I think user create template. This is the format which we need to serve. We can simply download that file, download users, or sorry, this thing, bulk create. Then here you have a download CSV template file. You can download it. So this file is the template. So you can store the user details in this format. Let me replace this with my acutelearn.com. Right, take this one. Okay. Now let me save this. So you can download the sample file and you can put the user details in that format. So now let me go to the bulk operations, bulk create, and select your CSV file. Select the file which has all the user details and click on submit. It would take some time. Yeah. Now we can see here, acute user one, user two, user four, like it created a multiple user account. So what are the user accounts which are existing here in the CSV file format? It is created with the default password, which I specified in the document. So this way you can create the bulk users and you can delete it. So for some reasons, any user account got deleted, Microsoft will keep that user account in deleted items for the period of 30 days of time. Okay. So when I go to the deleted items or deleted users, we would see a lot of user accounts got like a deleted. Okay. So if you want to restore it, I can select the user account. I can click on restore users and the user will be restored. For some reasons, if the user account is deleted, we can go back to the deleted user accounts and we can restore it. Right. Now let's see the invite external user. So an external user is a guest user who is outside of the organization. So his password will not be stored in Entra ID in our tenant. So what is required in order for other users? It requires basically the email ID. Email ID. So let me take some email ID. I'm giving one of the email address. So I'm giving it a name called as Ramana. And so what Microsoft Azure is going to do is it is going to send an email to this email address saying that you have been invited to this particular Entra ID tenant. Please accept it. And when a user is trying to log in, it is going to redirect to this particular URL of it. So we can provide same first name, last name, department, all these details. But if you see here, it doesn't prompt you for a password. Okay, so it's creating now the user account, the email account is different. So let me click on invite. So it is saying successfully invited a user. Now here, refresh it. When you go to the down somewhere, we should be able to see the that user. Yeah, it is that gmail.com. You have to. Okay. We will see that this is the user principal name. Now let me go to my Gmail. So I would see here, Microsoft invitation, invite you to access applications within their organization. So click on accept invitation. Click on this accept invitation. This is my way. Now we will send you the code to this one. Whenever you are logging in using this one to this particular tenant, it'll keep asking you for a code. And Microsoft will send a code to your email ID for verification. And first time so you are accepting this particular permissions. Click on accept. Subsequent, it will not prompt you for this screen, but for the first time, it takes a consent. Now I'm logging with this one. So it's again prompting for a multi-factor authentication. I'm saying skip. I would see that I get into this particular page where I get an apps. Okay. So as there are no licenses assigned to me, there are no applications or everything being assigned to me. So I don't see anything over here. So whenever you have someone is in your organization to whom you want to provide access to your this thing, but you don't want to create a user account within your Entra ID tenant, then you can click on basically external a user. You can create an external a user of it. Okay. So this is how you can create and the user accounts in Entra ID, and you can. So whenever you want to reset a password, you can select the user account which are created, and they can go and basically reset the password.